Along with other facets of history that appear to be popping up over the last few years, you have these theories about a place or a people related to Tartary. And so there are questions about where Tartary was located historically, who were the people, was it really in the east, was it really in the west, was it something that was contrived, is it just made up? However, there is plenty of evidence that a place named Tartary existed and exists, whether you're calling it Tartary or whether you're calling it Tartaria. And so there's another question, however, and it's not just about whether Tartary existed or whether there are people known as Tartarians. The question is about the meaning of Tartary. So you have a place going by this name and you have people going by this name, but you don't hear a lot of conversation about what this Tartary is all about. And so that's what we're going to dig into. One of the first things to make note of is that Tartary is an actual surname, and it appears to be coming out of France. This is interesting because Tartary is not understood as encompassing France, but we do have this surname that's coming out of France, and it's a pretty old surname, and there's the belief that this family contributed quite a bit to society, and this is a name with plenty of notoriety. Not surprisingly, this is a name of nobility, and you can see the spelling variations with this word Tartary. You see just Tartar, you see Tartarin, Tartary, Tartalt, Tartier. You see also Tartaru with the E-A-U-X, and again with the E-A-U. You see Tartaroon, Tartaron, Tater, Tartarson. And here you see some additional spelling variations for Tartary, and you also see that this name is spread around the world, and so you see a high incidence in Italy, you also see it in France, and again you see it in Argentina. Now, historically, Tartary is understood as the region that we now know of as Russia, China, and Turkey. And historically, this is a very active region of the world. But of course, you also have individuals asserting that Tartary actually encompassed another place, and we're going to look at that. Along with other assertions about America, you have individuals asserting that America is the actual Tartary. So you have America being presented as Rome, you have America being presented as Egypt, America being presented as Babylon. Now you have America being presented as Tartary. Is there no place of notoriety that America has not been identified as in terms of theories that plenty of people have? And so now we have this Tartary assertion. One thing to keep in mind about these names in these places is that the names sometimes indicate not just a land, but a people. And so if Tartary was a place historically that had Tartarians in it, when the Tartarians moved around, Tartary, in essence, moved around also. And so sometimes when you are reading about these dynamics with these particular regions or countries, what's really being referenced is the people. And so the land itself is not really doing anything. When they talk about people, the people of Tartary doing something, it's the Tartarians, it's the people of Tartary that are doing whatever they are doing. When you talk about ancient Babylon, it's not the land that's known as ancient Babylon that is significant, it's the people of the land of Babylon. And so what you have here also is you have people moving all around the world, and so therefore obscuring the identity of the place. And so you might have these so-called Tartarians moving to different places. You still have the place known as Tartary, But when the people move to different places, the essence of Tartary is actually moved. So when individuals move from Babylon, the actual essence of Babylon is relocated. If you recall, there was that people exchange between Greece and Turkey. And so when the people moved from Greece to Turkey, they became Turkish. When the people moved from Turkey to Greece, they became Greek. However, these are the same people that were located in the original spaces. And so people have been moving around the world at a rapid pace throughout history. And changing identities. And so therefore it's very difficult to understand exactly what you are talking about when you're talking about the Tartarians, for instance. And so since this is a very ancient name, a very ancient land, you have these people that were the original Tartarians. And so when you hear things historically about Tartary, it may not be talking about the people that are in the space known as Tartary now. It may be referring to the people that were originally in the space known as Tartary. And so that's something to keep in mind, because you can think about any place. You think about what's known as America right now. The people, many of them that are in America right now, they are not originally from America, but they may take on that title of American. However, everything about America is not about those individuals, because it depends on the specific point in time that you are talking about. And so who is the essence of America depends on the time frame, because again, it's one of these things that you can take on and take off. Citizenship is something that people can, sort of move around the world and take on these different identities. And so it looks like that's what you have even with this Tartary, because you can see that Tartary, that surname even, is popping up all over the place. And you can see the different spelling variations, the transliterations, and you can see that it's presenting in a variety of languages. And so here you see this first translation, and we're looking at, it just says that Tartar is anglicized, basically. And it's indicating that this involves a member of these combined forces of Central Asian people. This includes both the Mongols and the Turks under the headship of Genghis Khan. And so that's important to keep in mind. It's also related to a people group known to be in that space around the 13th century. And so it also indicates there's a connection between Tartary and Tamerlane. If you recall, we talked about Genghis Khan and Tamerlane in a previous discussion. Before we go further into this deconstruction, it's important to point out something, and that is that you have many people who are very much interested in tying their identities to famous groups of people historically. They want to be associated with any place or any people group that has any historical notoriety. And many people don't care whether it's good attention or bad attention. They simply want the attention. And so they will often attempt to hook themselves to some sort of ancestor that is asserted to have been from a particular place or a particular people group. And Tartary is no exception. And so we're just going to continue on here with this Tartary and this deconstruction. And so, of course, Tartary is thought to be in the place known as Russia. That's one of the places. Remember, Russia, China, and Turkey. And so when you look at the Russian translation of Tartar, you still see that in terms of the English, it's related to the people group, related to Central Asia. But when you look at the translation going into the Russian, Russia is identifying Tartar or Tartaria as Tatar, Tataric, Tartar, Tartarian, Tatarian. And so it is identifying a number of transliterations with respect to Tartar. And so the likelihood that Tartary or Tartaria or Tartar is something that is fictitious is slim. And you see this transliteration in terms of the language coming from the English into the Russian. And here you see the spelling variation of Tartaria, and it's identified as Portuguese. What's noteworthy, however, is when Tartaria is translated into the Russian, it is Tartaro. So you see the Tartaria, but you also see Tartaro. And this is important in terms of the etymology of Tartar, Tartaria, Tartary. You even see this in the Scots Gaelic, this Tartaro. In keeping with the dynamic coming out of Russia, which is understood as part of that Tartary, Tartaria region, you have in Chinese Tartary, Tartaria as Tartaro. And in the Hebrew, you have this Tartaria, and you also see Tartaro. You also see reference to this tar root in Tarsus in the New Testament related to Paul. And so you have Paul of Tarsus, and this is at 50:18, and this is in the Greek. And here you see Tarsus is associated with the land space that is associated with Tartary. So you see Tarsus is associated with present-day Turkey. And what you can see from looking at Britannica, that all of these words are rooted in the original word, which is Tartarus or Tartarus. And Tartarus or Tartarus is known as the infernal regions in Greek mythology. And so it's used for the deepest region of the world, the lower of the lower parts of the underworld. And so this is also understood as the place that is synonymous with Hades. And soon after Tarsus, you see in Strong's Concordance in the Greek at 50:20 that Tartary, Tartaria, Tartar is known as Tartaru, and that simply means to cast into hell. And so Tartaru, Tartarus, Tartar, Tartary, Tartaria is associated with or grows out of the word which means hell. And here you see additional information about Tartaros, Tartaru, Tartaro, that it is understood as the netherworld, a place of punishment, eternal punishment for those who are considered wicked. It's also considered the abode of the damned, a subterranean abyss. This is the place where the Titans were sent. Again, this Tartaros is the deepest abyss of Hades. It is where those who are wicked are incarcerated for eternal torment, according to the narrative. Also, again, means cast down to hell. Before we go any further, I just want to add that this particular name is something that a number of people are very interested in associating with the indigenous people of America and those who are understood as Black Americans or African Americans. There's the assertion that this is their true identity. Okay, moving right along. We also see here, related to World Atlas, that the Tartar people also are known as the Tatar people. They are understood as a Turkic speaking people found in the area of West Central Russia and the areas known as the former Soviet republics. And so you see again this Tatar, Tartary being understood as a part of northern Central Asia. And here you see that this name Tartary or Tartar is associated with what was known as the Golden Hordes in Europe. And so this included the people who were in the Siberian Khanate and also the Kazan or Kazan. What's interesting about this also is when you start to talk about Siberia, you start to see this connection between this area and people and those who are understood as Native Americans, because of course you know the narrative is that the Native American people were originally from this particular area that we were talking about, and that they migrated over the Bering Strait and all of that. That's all very interesting. The problem with some of these theories is that you still have this conquest dynamic. And so there is an association between the people who are understood as the Native Americans and the individuals who did the conquering of the Americas. And in some instances, what you had historically in terms of the loss of land and things like that, you had individuals who took on certain identities and then sold land that did not belong to them, sold territory that did not belong to them by taking on these identities. And so it's very interesting that you have such a heavy presence of this Siberian identity in the Americas when the same or similar people groups are also identified with the conquistadors, so the conquering force that came in under Dum Diversus and a number of other initiatives to take over what is now known as America or the Americas. And of course, that Kazan or Kazan or anything with Kaz, Khazaria, Kazakhstan, all of that, of course, harkens back to Kaz and Edom or Esau. So now you have the history of the Tatar people, and it indicates that in the early 13th century, you had several nomadic groups joined the Genghis Khan army, and this was leading to this fusion of these Turkic and Mongol people. And so you have this sort of creolized identity with these groups of people. That's why it's very difficult to tease out who is who, what is what, and where is where with respect to this. What's also noteworthy is that part of this collective sort of dissolved at the end of the 15th century, late 15th century. This is interesting because there were a few other things going on during the late 15th century. That's when you had the conquering of the Americas. That's when you had Columbus and all of these other entities finding their way in this direction. Interestingly, not knowing where they were going. It's also noteworthy that Columbus had a compass, and so it's impossible, unless his compass was just totally off, it's impossible that he thought that he was actually going east when he was traveling west. And this little wiki notation here about this Tartaro, it indicates that Tartaro, this is supposed to be a depiction of this mythical Tartaro. Tartaro was understood as a cyclops. And so you see here that Tartaro, Torto, Tartalo, was understood as a part of Basque mythology, and that Tartaro was this giant with one eye, understood as something similar to the Greek Cyclops. You also see that Tartaro is understood as Al-Arabi. It's also noteworthy that Al-Arabi is detected as a Yoruba word, and when you translate it into the English, it translates as the Arab. And so now you have all of these different cultures to try to connect the dots with this idea of Tartaro. What you see is Tartaro definitely has a history with respect to Central Asia. You also see that there's a relationship between Tartaro and Europe. And then, of course, you have people making the assertion that Tartaro is, in essence, the Americas or America. And then you have this Cyclops entity that is associated with this Tartaro or Tartar or Tartaria or Tartary. You also see the word, it's glaring, Tartary, Tartaria, and tartan. So here you see some additional depictions of Tartaro, also known as Tartalo. And so what we see is that Tartaria or Tartary, this is not likely a figment of the imagination. It appears to be an actual geographic space. It appears to have actual people groups associated with it. You see that with respect to these various surnames that are spread out around the world, actually. So you saw some evidence of it in Argentina, France, Italy. So you see the manifestations in a number of places that are apparently coming out of this Central Asia location. Historically, you also see a number of references with respect to Tartary and those who were associated with Western Europe, interestingly. So, those would have been those who came over to the Americas engaged in conquest. So, you have the Danes, you have the Scots, you have the Irish that have also been associated with Tartaria. You also have the Moors associated with Tartaria. And so, again, what's noteworthy is the meaning of Tartaria. And so it brings up the question of what is this identity, Tartaria, Tartar, Tartarian, Tartan? What is this really all about? And why people would be clamoring to be identified as Tartar or Tartarian. That's a mystery in and of itself, given the historical meaning of this word, Tartar, Tatar, Tartaria, Tartaru. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.